Hello, friends. Why aren't dogs good dancers? Because they have two left feet. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. February 23rd, 1928. I am writing this down so that what exists on this property may never be forgotten. I only hope that I can warn those who will inevitably come after me. My family has owned this 120-acre farm for more than 3 generations. Unfortunately, however, it will all end with me. My parents had a total of 3 children, with myself being the oldest. I never did end up getting married, and my 2 younger brothers were involved in a tragic wolf attack one day while working at the far end of our field by the edge of the forest. As soon as our father heard the screaming, he grabbed his rifle that he always kept beside him and started running. He was too far away, though. He ran as fast as he could with all of his adrenaline, but all he was able to do was watch as the wolf ripped a hole in his one son's stomach and sank its teeth deep into the other's neck. He shot at the wolf and missed. It stared at him without the least bit of fear in its eyes and slowly released my brother's neck from its teeth before scurrying into the forest. My father was never the same after that day, and he would never talk about it. The small town we lived in was also affected deeply by this back then. The story made the headlines in the local newspaper. They were only the ages of 12 and 14. About 3 years later, when I was in my late teens, my mother fell very ill from something the doctors at the time couldn't diagnose. She would get frequent headaches and she would slip in and out of unresponsive, coma-like states. One day, however, she never came out of it and her body slowly shut down over the course of a week. After this, my father's mental stability began to fade away. I began to notice that every night he would sit on the dark front porch with his rifle in his lap, just staring off into the distance. Whenever I would approach him about it, he would always have a worried look on his face and give me the same wild answer. "That wolf is still out there," he would say. "Something ain't right about that wolf." One night I awoke to a series of gunshots. I swiftly raised up and sat on the edge of my bed. There was an odd orange glow lighting up the curtains of my bedroom window. It flickered for a few moments and then it was gone. I quickly made my way downstairs. When I reached the front door, I heard my father yelling. "You won't take anything else away from me," he shouted. "Go back to hell where you came from, you vicious beasts." I flipped the porch lights on and I opened the door to see him attempting to reload his magazine. His arms were shaking uncontrollably, causing him to drop his handful of bullets. "Dad," I called to him. "What the hell are you shooting at? You're going to hit some of the cattle." I scanned the field in front of us, but all I could see was the sea of corn swaying in the cool night breeze. My father bent down to pick up the bullets and turned his head to look at me. There were tears running down his face. He opened his mouth to say something, but at first, all that came out was a choppy exhale caused by his violent shaking. Then he spoke. "I saw them. They didn't know I was here. They didn't think I could see." He trailed off for a few moments before saying something that truly perplexed me. "They aren't from here." His eyes widened as if the reality of the situation made its way back to him. "Come on, son. We have to get inside before they come back," he said sternly. I followed him through the front doorway and gave one last look toward the field before shutting and locking the door. I then went into the living room to find my father passed out on the couch with his rifle under his arm. I grabbed it and emptied the chamber before setting it down on the floor beside him. He turned on his side as I lay a blanket on top of him. At this point, I was wide awake and I couldn't help but ponder the night's events until the morning when I finally fell asleep on the recliner next to the couch. When I woke up, my father had made a full breakfast for us and set up the dining table at which to eat. "Hey there, you'd better hurry up before this gets cold," he said, smiling, as he set a plate of bacon on the table. I rubbed my eyes and gave him a questioning look. He seemed like a completely different person than the scared, shaking man from the night before. When I tried to bring it up, he simply shrugged it off and said not to worry about it, that he just had a rough night. "You know, son, I've been thinking," he said. "It's about time that I showed you how to do all that other stuff around the farm that you've been asking about. You're a grown man now and it's time I pass my responsibilities on to you." Part of me was curious as to the odd timing of his revelation, but I couldn't help but be excited to learn the things that I had watched him do all of my life. We spent the next few days from dawn to dusk working in the field. He showed me how to operate the tractor, sent me on errands, and showed me everything I would need to know for the day that I would take over the farm. It was really nice to see my father this way again after all these years, but I still had an uneasy feeling in my stomach. A week later I would find out why. I started the day like any other and got dressed to begin my morning chores. I went downstairs and saw that my father was already gone. I assumed that he just had an earlier start than I did. I laced my boots up and then headed out to the barn where I expected to meet him. There was still no sign of him. "Dad." I called out to him. "Where are you?" I glanced around the property back and forth looking for some kind of movement. Nothing. I decided to go ahead and walk down the old hunting trail that borders the forest. A few hundred feet down the path something caught my eye. My father's rifle was leaning against the old abandoned well from the very first homestead. My stomach dropped. He never left his rifle anywhere. Period. "Dad," I said as I slowly walked towards the well. When I got close enough I could see that there was blood dripping from inside the roof of the well. My eyes began to water. "No," I thought as I stepped even closer. Close enough to see a single bullet hole through the roof of the well. My knees grew weaker and I finally made it to the edge of the well. I peered inside. To this day I will never be able to unsee the mangled, contorted body of my father at the bottom of that well. I will always be cursed with the memory of those cold, dead, green eyes facing up and looking right through me. They were not his eyes, not anymore. I fell to the ground and began sobbing uncontrollably. I have never stopped blaming myself for not seeing how damaged he was. For not seeing why he chose that week to train me on all the things he had been putting off. It has weighed heavily on me for 7 years now. After I called to report his death, I swore to myself that I would follow through on his last wish and take care of this farm. From that point forward I put all of my emotions into tilling, plowing, building, and general upkeep. Once the grief had subsided, I found it a lot easier to carry on. That was until a few days ago. I was doing my normal round of putting out fresh feed for the animals when I noticed something off to my left. All of the cattle were huddled together and acting very upset. I hopped the gate and made my way through the cattle to see what they were crowded around. What I found made me take a step back. One of my dairy cows was lying on its back with its stomach torn open. 3 long gashes from its udders to its throat. It smelled horrible. I ran as fast as I could back to the gate and leaned against it as I threw up. I wiped my mouth and looked back at the rotting corpse. How the hell did I not hear this poor thing screaming? I thought. I held my elbow over my nose and mouth so I could get close enough to search around the cow. There didn't seem to be any sign of whatever it was trying to eat it, which I found odd. A predator wouldn't leave its fresh kill untouched. Then I saw it. No, I said out loud to myself. Wolf paw prints. One single set of huge tracks. I followed the tracks leading away from its kill for about 100 feet towards the forest tree line. It had rained the previous day, so luckily the tracks were easy enough to make out. As I got closer to the line of trees, I saw something that I couldn't make sense of. The set of 4 paw prints suddenly turned into only 2 points with a long stride between them. I immediately stopped and I noticed my breathing become more rapid. I couldn't bring myself to go any further towards the dark woods. I didn't have to. I could see that about 10 feet from where the tracks changed, they came to an abrupt stop. Right at the end of the trail there was marking in the dirt that almost looked burned. The marking resembled a circle with a series of triangles in it. I had never seen anything like it before in my life. When I got back to the house, I poured myself a tall glass of bourbon and sat down at the dining table. What kind of wolf stands up and walks on 2 feet? I asked myself. I called the local sheriff to let him know about my mauled cow and to let the other farmers in the area know to keep an eye on their livestock. He expressed his condolences and thanked me for calling it in. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the dead cow and storing the meat in my deep freezer. If there's one thing I learned by being the caretaker of a farm, it's that you don't let anything go to waste. Luckily the cold of the winter kept the meat from spoiling. Later that night I was sitting on the couch reading through some of the old newspapers that my father would hoard. I always liked following in his footsteps wherever I could. I went through a stack of 3 or so until I came upon one with a captivating title. Midville farmers mourn the tragic loss of their 2 sons. I just stared at the headline for a few moments. It occurred to me then that I had never actually read the article. As I read through the paragraphs detailing my mother's interview on the incident, one question stood out to me. Interviewer: were you able to see this wolf for yourself? Some rumors are saying that this wolf might be related to the town's folklore. Are you familiar with the legend of the Midville Dogman? Helen, don't you even start with that. My daddy used to tell me those stories as a kid just to scare me away from getting lost in the woods. They're nothing but nonsense. Midville Dogman? I thought. I wondered why I had never heard of it before if it's such a legend in this town. As it got late I started to doze off. The newspaper slipped out of my hands and fell to the floor. I decided it was time to turn in for the night. My eyes flew open and I shot up in my bed when I heard a loud bang coming from downstairs. I grabbed my father's rifle and paused to listen. The next sound that I heard was a deep and long scraping noise coming from the front porch. This was followed by a few evenly spaced thuds. Footsteps, I thought. I raised myself off of the bed, pointed the rifle in front of me, and carefully made my way down the steps. When I got to the bottom and turned the corner, I could see a bright orange light shining through the windows on the front side of the house. I walked closer to the front door. I put my hand on the doorknob and opened the door. What I then saw in the field I don't think I will ever be able to fully explain. A few hundred feet in from the house there was a large glowing oval shape. It hovered above the ground a few feet and its edges appeared to be on fire. Despite how far it was from me, I could still see it shimmering. It was almost hypnotizing. My attention turned slightly to the right, however, when I saw a large silhouetted figure running on all fours towards this light. My mouth dropped. In my life, I had never seen an animal this big in the area. Once it reached its destination, it paused. The great beast elevated its head slightly and I could tell it was smelling the air. Then it cocked its head to the left and I could make out two red, glowing dots facing my direction. My eyes widened. I took a step back and aimed my rifle at it. I didn't notice it before, but I was shaking uncontrollably. It was at this point that I heard an awful cracking noise coming from the direction of the beast. I watched in horror as the thing, in a jerky and unnatural way, stood up on its hind legs. My knees buckled beneath me and I collapsed backward from fright. I used my feet and hands to back myself further back into the house. The beast slightly raised its arm and cocked its head back. It then let out the most spine-chilling roar I had ever heard. I could feel it vibrating in my chest. The fear within me was so overwhelming that tears started to flow down my face. Then the beast slowly backed itself towards the orange circle. As it got closer, I almost thought I could see its hair caught on fire. Whenever it backed fully into the light, there was a bright flash and the circle collapsed into itself. The night was dark again. Everything was so quiet that I could hear my blood pumping in my head. The beast had vanished. Still shaking, I forced myself to my feet. In all the confusion, I didn't see what lay at the top of the steps on the front porch. I jumped back when I saw 3 decapitated cow heads facing the front door. There was a line of blood and fleshy chunks leading straight to the threshold. On the wooden door, there were 3 deep and widespread claw marks that stretched from the top left corner to the bottom right. There was still blood dripping through the freshly made grooves. I sat on the couch with my rifle pointed at the front door until the sun came up this morning. Today, as I am writing this, my bags are packed and I am leaving my family home. I now understand what drove my father to commit such an unspeakable act. I can sense in my gut that the dismembered cows and marks on the door were warnings. I'm not welcome here anymore. No one is welcome anymore. I have no idea what that thing was or where it came from. I do know that it was not a wolf or anything remotely close to that. I could feel a higher sense of intelligence. Whether or not that dark beast came from another world or even hell itself, I'll never know. I think I will be happy to never know. I just pray that I am able to leave whatever it was behind me on this property. To any of those who find this letter that I am leaving on my dining table, please, heed my warning and leave this place. It is not safe here. Especially at night.